The UMUADA, Nigeria's most powerful sisterhood you've never heard of. Picture this. It's dawn in a village in Anambra State, Nigeria. A funeral is about to begin. The clergy has arrived. The people have prepared everything. The corpse is ready to be brought into the compound. But suddenly, the road is blocked. Not by police, not by government officials, but by a group of women dressed in matching wrappers, their faces staring with authority. The burial cannot proceed, not until the family answers to them, not until justice is served, not until the daughters of the land have spoken. Welcome to the world of the UMUADA, the most powerful, most controversial, and most misunderstood women's institution in southeastern Nigeria. A sisterhood that can halt weddings, stop burials, discipline grown men, and reshape entire communities with a single collective decision. Today, we're diving deep into this ancient institution that's causing heated debates across Nigeria. Are they guardians of justice or enforcers of oppression? Cultural heroes or controversial vigilantes? Stay with me because this story will challenge everything you thought you knew about power, tradition, and women in African society. Let's start with the basics. The word UMUADA comes from two Igbo words, Umu, meaning children or a collective group, and Ada, meaning daughter. So UMUADA literally translates to daughters of the land or daughters of the lineage. But here's what makes this unique. In Igbo culture, when a woman marries, she doesn't just join her husband's family, she moves to his village. She becomes what's called Nwanyidi, a married woman in a foreign land. But in her father's village, her natal home, she remains Ada, a daughter with sacred rights and responsibilities that never expire. The UMUADA is made up of all the daughters of a particular village or community, whether they are married, single, young, or old. Originally centered around first daughters who held special status, the institution has evolved to include all biological daughters of the community. This isn't some new invention. The UMUADA system dates back to pre-colonial times, woven into the very fabric of Igbo Republican society. While colonial records tried to erase or minimize women's power, the UMUADA survived. They adapted. They endured through the colonial period, through the Nigerian Civil War from 1967 to 1970, through military dictatorships and into modern Nigeria. Today, you'll find UMUADA groups in every Igbo community across Abia, Anambra, Ebonyi, Enugu, Imo, and parts of Delta states and rivers. In some areas, they are called Umuogu, in others, Ndimgoto, but the power they wield, that's universal. Now, here's where it gets really fascinating. The UMUADA aren't just a social club. They possess powers that would make any governance structure jealous. Let me break it down, what they can actually do. When families clash over land, when brothers fight over inheritance, when disputes threaten to tear communities apart, the UMUADA step in as the ultimate mediators. They are considered impartial because they don't live in the community, they've married out. They have no personal stakes in local politics. During the colonial era, when people lost faith in British court systems, riddled with corruption and bribery, they turned to the UMUADA. The institution provided what the courts couldn't: reconciliation, not judgment; healing, not just punishment. The UMUADA are the keepers of tradition. They perform rituals that men cannot. They oversee cultural practices, ensure proper burial rites, and maintain the spiritual health of their communities. In Igbo cosmology, daughters hold sacred positions. They can invoke blessings and curses, perform cleansing rituals, and mediate between the physical and spiritual realms. This is where things get very controversial. The UMUADA have the authority to discipline erring members of their family, especially women married into the community. If a wife mistreats her mother-in-law, neglects family responsibilities, or violates community norms, the UMUADA can intervene. And the methods, they range from verbal warnings to public sanctions. At weddings, the UMUADA must receive their due. Traditionally, items like tea, bread, drinks, and financial gifts. At funerals, they must be properly welcomed and honored. If their demands aren't met, they have the power to halt proceedings entirely. During burials, where elderly mothers allegedly die from neglect by their children, the UMUADA arrived with firewood, demanding the children bring out the meat they had killed so they could roast and eat it. Wearing gloves and nose masks, they sing songs accusing the children of neglect. At this point, the burial stops. Not even the priest would intervene until the children beg for forgiveness and are actually forgiven. Historically, the UMUADA held political sway that rivaled male councils. They could veto decisions, advocate for human rights, and challenge patriarchal excesses. During the famous Women's War of 1929, women's groups, including UMUADA groups, protested colonial taxation and authorities, demonstrating their capacity for collective political action. Before we dive into the controversies more, let's acknowledge what makes the UMUADA genuinely remarkable, because there's a reason this institution has survived for centuries. Long before Western feminism reached Nigerian shores, Igbo women had the UMUADA. This was a space where women's voices mattered, where they could challenge male authority, where they held power that transcended the marital status. In some Igbo communities, women who excelled could take the Omezwe title, traditionally reserved for men, and participate in male-designated rituals. The first daughter, the Ada, was granted what researchers call male privileges and responsibilities, a recognition that gender roles in Igbo society were more fluid than colonial observers understood. Multiple researches confirm that the UMUADA excel at de-escalating conflicts. They bring emotional intelligence, cultural legitimacy, and spiritual authority to disputes. Unlike formal courts that create winners and losers, the UMUADA focus on reconciliation and restoration of relationships. During the Biafran War, UMUADA groups provided humanitarian support, shelter, food, and care for displaced people. They became crisis managers when formal structures collapsed. The UMUADA actively protect women's rights within their communities. They confront domestic violence, advocate against harmful widowhood practices, and create support networks for vulnerable women. They've campaigned to secure women's inheritance rights and challenge discriminatory customs. In modern times, UMUADA groups run educational groups, health initiatives, and economic empowerment schemes. They've evolved from purely traditional roles into contemporary advocates for women's welfare. The UMUADA serve as cultural anchors, teaching younger generations about their heritage, language, and traditions. They ensure that the Igbo culture doesn't disappear in the face of urbanization and westernization. When a family neglects an elderly parent, when children abandon their responsibilities, When powerful people abuse their positions, the UMUADA provide a check on misconduct that transcends wealth and status. They cannot be bought. They fear no one. This makes them inviolable guardians of communal morality. As one community member testified, if there's one thing I'm proud of in my maternal home, it is these powerful women. But what are the dark sides? Here's what we need to have, though an uncomfortable conversation. The UMUADA institution is facing its greatest crisis of legitimacy. Social media is flooded with videos that tell a different story. Social media clips show powerful women appearing to prioritize their entitlements over empathy for a young life lost. Another video showed UMUADA blocked the road during her father's burial, refusing to let the cops enter the compound because she and her sisters hadn't served them tea and bread at 4 a.m. They demanded payment of fines before proceedings could continue. Young people are pushing back. One viral complaint showed a woman lamenting that she was about to be prevented from marrying because her fiancé couldn't afford the excessive demands from UMUNA and UMUADA groups, who, in her words, have never bought her anything. Not sweet, not book, not pencil, nothing. Videos circulating online show women being doused with dirty water, painted with ashes, forced to kneel for hours, or publicly shamed for alleged infractions. While defenders argue that these are traditional disciplinary methods, critics call them human rights violations. The question being asked, when does cultural enforcement become abuse? The painful irony. UMUADA seen as bargaining with patriarchy. Women are given power and importance, but that power is sometimes used to enforce the very norms that oppress women. This importance conferred on them by men is used as a method to reinforce social norms, sex stereotypes, and gender-based violence and discrimination against women. These are part of the system and they don't even see it. It's woman-to-woman violence in the name of tradition. The UMUADA structure is hierarchical and territorial. Your village's UMUADA should only have authority in that village, but instances of overreach are common. Groups attempting to police women in other communities, making demands beyond their traditional scope, or interpreting their powers too broadly. The incident where villagers stopped an UMUADA group from another community highlights this problem. Tradition has rules. When those rules are violated in the name of tradition itself, the system loses legitimacy. Nigeria has a constitution. It has laws protecting human rights, dignity, and freedom from degrading treatment. The UMUADA operates in a parallel system of customary law that sometimes conflict with statutory law. Can a group, no matter how traditional, halt a burial or wedding and demand ransom? Can they impose physical punishment? Can they shame someone publicly? These are legal questions with no easy answers. The UMUADA system was designed for tightly knit village communities where everyone knew everyone. But modernity has scattered these communities. Women live far from their natal homes. Intermarriage across ethnic groups has complicated identity. Distance and economic pressures make it difficult for women to attend to family matters regularly. This disconnect breeds resentment. Young, educated women living in Lagos or abroad are expected to drop everything, travel back to the village, and participate in meetings they may find irrelevant or oppressive. This system